This podcast is supported by MIDI Health. Are you in midlife, feeling dismissed, unheard, or just plain tired of the old healthcare system? You're not alone. For too long, women's serious midlife health issues have been trivialized, ignored, and met with a just deal with it attitude. Many of us have been made to feel ashamed or forgotten. In fact, even today, 75% of women seeking care for menopause and perimenopause issues are left entirely untreated. But here's the powerful truth. It's time for a change. It's time for MIDI. MIDI is not just a healthcare provider. It's a women's telehealth clinic, founded and supported by world-class leaders in women's health. What sets MIDI apart? We are the only women's telehealth brand covered by major insurance companies, making high-quality expert care accessible and affordable. Our clinicians provide one-on-one, face-to-face consultations where they truly listen to your unique needs. We offer a full range of holistic, data-driven solutions, from hormonal therapies and weight loss protocols to lifestyle coaching and preventative health guidance. This isn't one-size-fits-all care. This is care uniquely tailored for you. At MIDI, you will join our patients who feel seen, heard, and prioritized. You will find that our mission is clear: to help all women thrive in midlife, giving them access to the health care they deserve. Because we believe midlife isn't the middle at all. It is the beginning of your second act. Ready to feel your best and write your second act script? Visit joinmidi.com today to book your personalized insurance-covered virtual visit. That's joinmidi.com. MIDI, the care women deserve.
Everybody, welcome to Scott Fox After 9. Happy to say it is actually a little bit warmer for a change in Southern Ontario today, so I've got a little bounce in my step. 8 degrees. You know, I feel like we should be a lot better than this, but good news, gas prices dropped last night. If you're one of my Southern Ontario listeners, and unfortunately that's the only part of Canada that I have a reference point for here, gas prices in Southern Ontario went down about 13 cents a litre overnight. Great news. We need it. And you know what? They're way higher than they need to be right now anyway. But they're going back up again tomorrow, about 7 cents, and then another increase on Friday as well. So today is definitely the day to get gas. I'm going to try and provide a little soundtrack for you here on After 9. I've got a whole bunch of different things from across Canada that I think you should hear today. You're going to get a little bit of question period. You're going to get a little bit of the Ontario legislature, and I'm going to start off today in Manitoba. Yesterday was budget day in Manitoba, and the finance minister came out and did something that I wasn't expecting, but I'm pleasantly surprised to hear it. Listen to this.
Honorable Speaker, ask any Manitoban where they're feeling squeezed by high costs the most, and they'll tell you it's at the grocery store. Families are choosing to buy less fresh fruit and vegetables. They're clipping coupons, comparison shopping, and passing on the name brands they used to like better. They're doing all they can, but still falling behind, all while big grocery companies make record profits. So what can little Manitoba do in the face of rising prices across the country and big chains that are determined to drive down competition and raise your prices? Well, I'm here today to tell you that we're prepared to go further than any province has gone and use every tool available to get your grocery prices down. Honorable Speaker, we're going after the big grocery chains with everything we've got. We're cracking down on the property controls that grocery companies use to freeze out competition so they can charge you more. We've already gotten rid of some, and we're going to fight every single one that's left. We're going after predatory pricing with new legislation that makes it illegal for big companies to use your private data to charge you more. And we're moving forward with our first in Canada grocery study to find more ways to fight back against these shady and exploitative practices. What else can we do to help you at the grocery store? We can step in as your government to directly lower your costs. It started when we froze the price of milk, and our next important step is to take the PST off of all food at the grocery store.
Well. I got to tell you, I am very pleasantly surprised to hear that. I wasn't necessarily expecting one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios in Canada now to come out of an NDP budget. But here we are. They've done it. Congratulations to the Government of Manitoba. And you know what? Taking the tax off of food, I think that's the right thing to do. I honestly do. You know, we are paying so much more than we used to at the grocery store. Our money has been devalued so much. It's really disgusting. And I think it is a great day when a government recognizes that and takes the tax off of groceries. There's certain things in life that you absolutely need. Food and shelter, I think, are the main two. And the government taxes them. Congratulations to the Manitoba government who is taking the tax off of groceries. We shouldn't be charging tax on any food. Let me give you a little example of why this is so effective. Do you remember, was it last year or the year before? We had the GST holiday, and part of that holiday was no tax on food. It is remarkable how many people went back out to restaurants and supported our restaurant industry. It is incredible how many people started buying the products that they used to buy, but they became too expensive. Once the tax was off, they were a lot more attainable. And in a lot of cases, those were healthier options than what people are eating now. We need good, nutritious food. Government taking the tax off, I think that's great. So congratulations to Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew and his government on delivering a relatively close to balanced budget. Not balanced by any means. They're still running a deficit, but it's actually one of the lower deficits in Canada. And part of the reason that they've got a deficit is they're taking the tax off of groceries. I think that's a great move. Here is Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew.
We are taking the provincial tax off of all food from grocery stores. So that means that rotisserie chickens, salads, a case of bubbly, all the stuff that you're grabbing on the way home when you're in a rush and you gotta try and put a meal on the table for the family. Right now you'd be paying the PST. After our budget passes, assuming it passes by July 1st, that will all be tax-free.
That's great. Hey, one of the problems is the government draws a distinction. If it's raw at the grocery store, you don't pay tax on it, no GST. However, if it's prepared, you do. And I don't understand the difference. I mean, food is food, whether it's cooked or not. And I think this is a great move. So again, I wasn't expecting to be saying this, but here I am doing it. Congratulations to the NDP government in Manitoba taking the tax off at the grocery store. Well done. Now, this is not unanimous by any means. You heard from the premier. Now let's hear from the PC leader in Manitoba. What's this guy's name? Obi Khan is his name. He's got some criticism for this. So in the name of being balanced, let's give you both sides of the argument.
These affordability measures are sprinkling pennies across families where families need real dollars. 7 cents on a can of pop. And for the premier to laugh about a rotisserie chicken or a chicken rotisserie, saving 63 cents for a family is actually really, really sad behavior from the premier. I am just shocked by how poor this budget is laid out and thoughts for the future of Manitoba. You look at the wildfire budget in this budget, they did not increase it. So it was $100 million under the previous PCs. It was dropped to $50 million. And even with the record fires last year, it stays at $50 million for some reason. If you look at the drug consumption site that we've been advocating against and modeling a recovery model, that you see that this government has budgeted 5 times the money for a drug consumption site or a safe consumption site, whatever you may want to call it, versus what they budgeted for recovery. The premier walked back his promise of the drug consumption site, put on pause. He's now walking back the balanced budget. He's walking back the affordability that he promised to fix. He has killed the economic horse. We are in trouble when it comes to the province of Manitoba, and all that to be topped with the premier wants to play games as if the calling an election is a political game of Russian roulette to have fun with. An additional $50 million expense is what it's going to cost Manitobans. So, I mean, if I had to sum it up, I would say I'm shocked. I'm disappointed. that there was nothing in this budget that actually laid out a plan to make Manitoba better.
Okay, all right. Clearly, there's some politics afoot happening in Manitoba. The PCs out there are promising real relief by making the first $30,000 you earn tax-free. They say that'll save the average family $3,000 a year. Okay, great. Nice to see some things on the table here for families, but either way, I'm not going to back down in my congratulations for the government in taking the tax off of food. I thought that was a great move. Good job to Premier Wab Kinew, but again, clearly, politics are going to continue to politic out there in Manitoba. Now let's go to New York. Yesterday, the National Transportation Safety Board did another news conference updating their investigation into what the hell happened with that Air Canada flight that crashed into a fire truck as it was landing at LaGuardia Airport.
The following is a summary of events captured on the cockpit voice recorder during the final 3 minutes of the recording. All times are referenced to the end of the CVR recording. At 19 seconds, an electronic 100 enhanced ground proximity warning system callout occurred. At 17 seconds, Truck 1 read back the runway crossing clearance. At 14 seconds, an electronic 50 call out. At 12 seconds, an electronic 30 call out. And at that same time, the tower instructed a Frontier Airlines flight to hold position. At 11 seconds, an electronic 20 call out occurred. And at 10 seconds, an electronic 10 call-out occurred. At 9 seconds, the tower instructed Truck 1 to stop. At 8 seconds, there was a sound consistent with the airplane's landing gear touching down on the runway. At 6 seconds, there was a pilot transfer of controls from one pilot to the other. And at 4 seconds, the tower again instructed Truck 1 to stop. At 0 seconds, the recording ended.
Okay, I know that was a little bit dry, and I did cut a little bit of that out for timing, but the reason that's important is it gives us a really interesting timeline. When the tower told the truck it was okay to cross, the plane was just 10, 20 feet off the ground. It was almost on the ground. We now know that there was only about 4 seconds that plane had to try and reverse thrust and slow down before it hit the fire truck. And at that point, it likely would have seen the fire truck. And by all accounts, it sounds like the pilots probably, and they lost their lives. That is a huge tragedy. But it sounds like they probably saved a lot of lives because they did manage to slow the plane down substantially before it made impact with that fire truck. Again, a horrible tragedy. But I mean, if there's any solace for the family of those pilots, they should know that those pilots probably saved everyone on that plane, or the vast majority of people on that plane. 41 injured. However, it could have been a heck of a lot worse had they not had that heads up thought to instantly jam on the brakes. And when they did that, a lot of passengers were thrust forward. Obviously, you know that if you're in a car and somebody hits the brakes, you get thrown forward. They got thrown forward again on the impact. And the pilots probably, like I said, they probably saved lives. I am still fascinated by this story. I've had a number of people in the aviation industry reach out to me with various commentary and thoughts. Some of those I may share with you on listener DMs on Friday. Either way, man, oh man. I also feel bad for the air traffic controller. Can I tell you that? I mean, you heard it in the audio in yesterday's pod. He said, I messed up. And as soon as he said that, I thought, oh my God, he's going to have to take that with him through the rest of his life. A simple mistake. And right now it seems like it was probably human error, but a simple mistake, a simple miscommunication. And this is what happened. The pilots lost their lives. And apparently that flight attendant that was thrown out the front of the airplane, still strapped into her jump seat. She's going to live. Multiple broken bones in her legs, but it's a miracle that she is alive. And I'll keep following this story, friends. I don't really have much more to say other than one thing that I do find a little distasteful is apparently the Languages Committee in Ottawa is not happy with the fact that the Air Canada CEO, when he released his condolence statement on Monday, only did it in English. And they're pointing out that we have 2 official languages, and he should have also made the statement in French. This is the same Air Canada CEO who lived in Quebec, but admitted he doesn't speak any French, but did commit to learn. Well, the defense for why he didn't do that in French appears to be that he wanted to convey a sincere message, and he wasn't confident in his ability to be able to do that in French, only in English. That's why he only did it in English. And let's face it, if he'd done it in French and it didn't come off as serious or somber as some people feel it should have, then they would have criticized him for that. So now the Languages Committee has summoned him to Ottawa. He's got until May the 1st to show up and appear before a committee and explain why he didn't do that condolences message in both official languages. Hey, listen, I think it's a fair question. If you're the CEO of a national company representing Canada like Air Canada, you probably should be able to communicate in both official languages. I'm running for office, so I'm learning both official languages. I think that's an important thing to do. But is that really Ottawa's top priority right now? You know, we've got 41 people hurt, 2 pilots dead, and a serious situation here. And their first thought is, why didn't he give the condolence message in both languages? Relax, Ottawa. There's going to be time for that. Absolutely. And it's not that it's not a serious concern, but does that really need to be dealt with right now? I found that really distasteful. Friends, let's now go to Ottawa. Yesterday, question period. Mark Carney was in Ottawa, but he wasn't answering questions in question period. Here's just a little bit from yesterday.
Mr. Speaker, with that kind of incompetent, incoherent answer, it's not hard to understand how that minister failed to investigate 97% of the 150,000 suspected cases of fraud in the international student program. Mr. Speaker, not only that, of the 3% that he did have investigated, they abandoned half of those because the suspected fraudster did not respond to investigators' emails. Mr. Speaker, this is the current Liberal government. Will the current Liberal Prime Minister take responsibility, fire that minister, the Justice Minister, and the Immigration Minister?
Minister of Justice.
Speaker, if he wants to talk about incompetence in politics, he need look no further than the mirror. Listen to the approach that he takes on Canada-U.S. relations, saying it's not the Americans' fault, it's ours, we're stupid, while his caucus colleagues go down to south to say that we're throwing a hissy fit up here. You want to see incompetence? Let's look at the Conservative leader's statements calling the RCMP leadership despicable and calling on his political opponents to be jailed. We will move forward with thoughtful policy.
I'm going to cut that off. The Prime Minister is not answering questions, which is very, very suspect. He was in Ottawa yesterday. Him and Pierre spoke at the prayer breakfast in Ottawa yesterday. Why wasn't the Prime Minister answering questions in question period? There's a lot going on right now, and we haven't heard from the Prime Minister since Pierre did his trip down to the States. Maybe the Prime Minister should come out and congratulate Pierre for making progress, for getting such widespread attention. Over 4 million views so far on his appearance on the Joe Rogan Experience. Why isn't the Prime Minister talking in the House of Commons? I don't understand that. And by the way, that criticism from the Justice Minister, Sean Fraser, is just completely unserious. It's dirty, dirty politics. Listen, we have question period. It's part of our political foundation. The opposition has a responsibility to try and hold the government to account. And if they won't answer questions, what the hell are we doing here? It doesn't make any sense. I'm going to play just a couple more questions and responses from yesterday. I'm not going to do any more Pierre Poilievre because clearly nobody is going to answer his question. They don't want to give him the time of day. And frankly, the Liberals right now are quite upset that Pierre has earned himself some new respect from Canadians who had previously said they won't vote for him. Well, now there's a lot of people giving Pierre a second look, particularly after he did that trip to Washington. Sorry, not to Washington. He didn't go to Washington. After he did that trip to the States. The Liberals don't like it. And I don't think there's anybody, even Liberals, that believe the current polls that are out there right now that say the Liberals have some massive insurmountable lead. The tides are shifting right now. Polls are a lagging indicator, and right now the Liberals are on the defense. That's the only explanation for why the Prime Minister did not show up yesterday. Here is about 40 seconds from question period, Michelle Rempel-Garner.
Let's look at the plan. 150,000 cases of student permit fraud under this Prime Minister, this Liberal Prime Minister. They just bought an entire hotel for asylum claimants with tax dollars. Bogus asylum claimants are getting better health care than Canadian seniors who have paid their whole life into the system. Yet that immigration minister still has her job. Why?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, here they go again. Here they go again, Unreal. Mr. Speaker. This immigration minister has brought a situation under control.
Okay, stop that right there, too. It's not under control. If you heard yesterday's pod, you already know what I'm talking about. If you didn't get a chance to hear the Tuesday episode, it was a lot to do with immigration, a lot to do with it. And it was in particular following up on the Auditor General's report that there were massive examples of fraud flagged, 153,000 examples of fraud in the student visa system. Only 4,000 of them got investigated, and of those, 1,600 were marked inconclusive because the person just didn't reply to the letter from the government. Can you just do that? Like, if you're facing deportation but ignore the letters from the government, does that mean you get to stay? No, of course it doesn't. That's preposterous. But the government just sort of let it go. I find that to be very, very dishonest. I think that is, I think the government has questions to answer here. And frankly, they're avoiding answering the questions. And all they want to do is take shots at the opposition. Newsflash, you don't have to like Pierre Poilievre or the opposition, but you do have to recognize the fact that none of the problems right now were caused by Pierre Poilievre. He's not in charge. He never was the prime minister. Mark Carney is the prime minister, and he's the one who won't be accountable for what he's saying. I want to now take you to Toronto. Yesterday, the chief of police, Myron Demkew, did a news conference to announce it's finally here, friends. Things have gotten so bad in Canada that now the Toronto police are going to be carrying military-style assault rifles openly on the streets. Listen to this.
The key words here are rapid response. I want to be clear today that this announcement is not about any particular threat, but the growing volume and complexity of threats related to terrorism, extremism, and hate-motivated incidents. This is about being proactive. And to be proactive, we're also announcing today the launch of Task Force Guardian. We know that visible police presence matters when it comes to deterring violence and reassuring our communities. As part of Task Force Guardian, Torontonians can expect to see Toronto police officers deployed with tactical capabilities, including patrol rifles. If you see these officers, whether it's around places of worship or tourist hubs, it does not mean there's an imminent threat. What it means is we are strategically positioning resources to protect our communities and to be able to respond quickly if necessary. These measures are informed by best practices and lessons learned from our partners around the world.
I don't know if anybody's happy hearing that. I mean, in a way, that's probably good news. The police are taking the threat seriously, and right now, what was it they said? Extremism, terrorism, hate-motivated crimes. These are all things that they have to worry about. But one of the things Canadians have prided themselves on over many years is how safe this country is. Is it still that safe when the biggest police force in the country needs to carry around military-style assault rifles and have a counterterrorism unit stationed outside tourist attractions, transit, places of worship, and so on? That's what it's come to. That's where Canada is in 2026. By the way, the irony of this is not lost on me. Do you remember back, there was an election many years ago where the Liberal Party was trying to win power while Stephen Harper was in charge. And the Liberals decided to run a series of attack ads against Stephen Harper. Listen to this Liberal attack ad from 2006 where they warned what would happen under a Stephen Harper government.
Stephen Harper actually announced he wants to increase military presence in our cities. Canadian cities. Soldiers with guns. In our cities. In Canada. We did not make this up. Choose your Canada.
Choose your Canada. Do you want a country with soldiers and military guns in the streets? Vote Liberal. Okay, well, they didn't in that election, but they eventually did. And now under the Liberals, we basically have soldiers in the streets with guns to protect people. That's how serious things have gotten. Crazy. I've got a special guest that I'm going to bring in a few minutes. If you heard my Bitcoin episode that I released towards the beginning of 2026, I get a lot of feedback on that one because there was a lot of people who appreciated that common sense, simple breakdown of what Bitcoin is and how Bitcoin works. Well, my guest on that episode, his name was Ian, and he's going to come on with me again in a few minutes. He texted me the other night after listening to my episode on Monday. I was doing the best of Pierre Poilievre on his U.S. tour. And something in particular about what came up in Pierre's remarks struck a nerve with Ian. So he wants to come on and explain to me what he noticed. I'm going to get to that coming up in just a few minutes. First off, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on Ontario politics because Doug Ford is not my favorite person right now. There are a lot of protests happening outside Queen's Park every day right now, protesting various things that Doug Ford is up to. I just want to play a little bit of yesterday's question period. Here is the leader of the opposition, New Democrat member, Marit Stiles.
Thank you, Speaker. Yesterday, and this question is to the Premier, because yesterday, Premier, we gave you an opportunity to reverse course. It is clear that you have not taken the time to listen to students and their families who are impacted by this government's cuts to OSAP. I wanted to share something with the Premier today, Speaker, that I heard from a nursing student at Mohawk College recently, and that she asked me to share. She says, as a mother of three and a nursing student, OSAP is not just financial aid to me, it is the reason I am able to stay in school. Choosing to go back to school was not an easy decision. It meant reducing my income. It meant balancing clinical placements, assignments, exams, raising young children, including a baby who still needs daycare. So my question to the Premier is, what does the Premier have to say to students like this who are having to stop their education because of his cuts?
Recognize the Minister of Community Colleges and Universities.
Thank you, Speaker. The Premier and I have been very clear. The OSAP framework was unsustainable. In fact, the Auditor General stated it was unsustainable in 2017 as well, but a desperate Liberal government decided to move forward with 85% grants because they were desperate.
Order.
Speaker, we understand that we need financial aid not just for these students, but for the next generation of students. When it comes to health human resources, we do have our Ontario Learn and Stay grant, which we've invested over $173 million.
I'm going to cut this guy off. That is Member of Provincial Parliament Nolan Quinn. I'm led to believe he's in charge of universities and colleges. And frankly, I think he's smug. I think every one of those members sitting behind Doug Ford is. Let me make the argument about OSAP one last time, and let me make it as clear as possible. If the government wants to change the OSAP program, which they have presided over for 8 years, Doug Ford's been in charge of OSAP, never said a word about it. If they want to change it, that's their prerogative. They can. But they can't do it with no notice. There are some families that have been saving since the day their kid was born for post-secondary so that their kid would not have to take on massive amounts of debt. To move the goalpost in March for a school year that starts in September is wrong. They need to give people notice. Now, my common sense solution was go ahead and announce these changes, but say they don't kick in until 2030. Anyone who's in high school right now should be grandfathered in under the old system. And you don't have to like the old system. It has a lot of issues. But either way, that was the rules that were defined for these kids in preparation of going to university. Now they're ready to go, and Doug Ford is not only allowing the universities and colleges to raise their tuition, he's also greatly increasing the amount of debt that these students are going to have to take on. The OSAP funding isn't sustainable. That's nonsense. There's more than enough money. We all pay more than enough in taxes. The problem here is Doug Ford wants to bail out condo developers. Doug Ford is going to take the money from education, and what's he going to do with it? He's going to buy up condos that developers built but couldn't sell. In other words, developers that made a bad investment, Doug Ford is going to be there taking from the taxpayers to bail those people out. And you know what? I can't even explain this as articulately as someone who I like a lot, Ron Butler, the mortgage guy. Maybe you've seen Ron on television a time or two. Ron has a really unique way of explaining things. And yesterday, Ron decided he wanted to talk about on his blog what Doug Ford is doing. Taking money out of OSAP and giving it to developers who made a bad investment. I'm going to play about a minute and a half of Ron. Listen to this.
All right, so this in my head is like fucked around the bend, okay? So we got the provincial government, the Ontario government is providing a fund, they're setting up a fund, and they're going to give $300 million worth of financing to this group, this new investment company, who's only going to put up $6 million of their own money. The fuck? Oh, and what it is to do is to buy condos that are distressed, condos that the developer's stuck with, okay? They built the building, but they're stuck with some excess because, well, Toronto condo crash, people are stuck with shit. So these guys are going to be given provincial help to buy these units up, and they're going to swear that they're going to provide low-cost rents. They're going to be below market rents. 25% of the units they will have below market rents. So fucking what? Because apparently after a few years, these guys can sell the fucking condos again. And so who gives a fuck at below market rents? Like, what is this bullshit anyway from the provincial government? So is this a kind of a bailout? Like what would normally happen is if the developer were stuck with the extra condos they couldn't sell for too long, they would either have to cut the prices to nothing, just super low to get rid of like dog crate condos they were stuck with, or they couldn't pay the loans they've got, they'd have to go into receivership, in which case the receiver would sell those dog crate condos for super cheap, okay? So the advantage there is if the price of the condos plummeted, good for the people. Good. That's good for rents, right? I mean, that's got to be good for rent. That's below market rents. If you're selling a condo way to fuck below what the previous prices were, that guy who bought the condo could rent it out really cheap. But why are we giving this group of investors this advantage? Like, what the fuck's going on there? Like, another one of these famous Doug Ford deals with investors, with investment companies, like, or developers, or like, what the fuck? I mean, why are we doing anything to bail out developers? Why don't we let the market fucking have the result? And if you got to sell them super cheap to the public, or you sell them super cheap, or you go in receivership, and the receiver will sell them super cheap. So why is this group, who's only putting up $6 million, getting $300 million of guaranteed financing, and that gives them access to another $1 billion of various types of bank and non-bank? Like, they're going to buy $1.3 billion worth of condos with $6 million down. That's 0.5%. That is a fuck up, folks. I do not get this.
Frankly, Ron, I do get it. Let me explain it to you. Doug Ford is going to take money out of education. We could have had a low debt, well-educated workforce. We've got all kinds of students that have got dreams and ambitions, and all they want is the same opportunity that the kids before them had. Doug Ford is saying absolutely not. He said they're ripping off taxpayers. He basically called them all cheats and accused them of being terrible at money management and all sorts of stuff. It was terrible the way Doug Ford went after middle-class families and students. That money that he was going to invest into grants as part of the OSAP program, he's now going to use to buy up old condos that didn't sell, and they're going to promise for now to make them affordable housing units. But as Ron explained, there's a lot of gray area in there as well. I think what Doug Ford is doing to students is horrible. But even worse, is these new freedom of information laws. Not only does he want to change the freedom of information laws so that he doesn't have to be nearly as transparent as previous governments were, he wants to make it retroactive so he can get around a court ruling that would allow him to not have to turn over his cell phone records as the courts ordered him to do. Yesterday, when the leader of the opposition, Marit Stiles, you heard her a few minutes ago, when she was talking and asking a question of the premier in the House, not only did Doug not get up and answer the question, he was on his phone during it. Marit got asked about that after question period.
We had a gallery full of students in the chamber, and they were looking for some answers to the questions they have from this premier. And the premier was too busy playing on his phone. Now, I don't know if he was doing government business or playing Candy Crush. I have no idea, but I think those students deserved some answers.
You're damn right they do, Marit. Okay, you know what? That's where I'm going to leave the Doug Ford stuff. I have no more time for this guy. New poll is out, though, and I'll just leave this part of it on that. New poll is out, and I believe it was it Leger? Was it Abascus? Who knows? In any case, this is what the Abascus poll, there it is. This is what the Abascus poll found. Majority of respondents, 60%, oppose Doug Ford's planned changes to the Freedom of Information laws. 75% are against the government making those changes retroactive. And that is the part that allows Doug to not have to turn over his cell phone records. 75% of the people surveyed are opposed to Doug Ford doing that, and he's going to ram it through anyway. Bananas. Anyway, friends, I'm going to move on from that. I told you I would bring in Ian, my Bitcoin guy, because something in the Pierre Poilievre episode on Monday piqued Ian's interest, and it has to do with Bitcoin. So I said, you know what? Just come on the pod and explain it to everybody. They know who you are. They probably heard the Bitcoin episode over the holidays. So let's bring in Ian. How are you?
Hey, Scott. I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. You sent me a text message on Monday after you listened to the Pierre Poilievre episode, and it had to do with, was it reserve currency is what you wanted to talk about?
Actually, I really just wanted to talk about one part of the podcast that I found really interesting. Overall, the podcast was, very fascinating, 2.5 hours long. But
you mean him on Joe Rogan?
Yes, Joe Rogan. Yes, of course.
Okay.
But one of the things he said was about the biggest fraud. Did you catch that, Scott?
The biggest fraud, yes. He was talking about inflation and how printing money is the biggest fraud on the working class people.
Yeah, and he actually said he described the printing and borrowing of money by governments as the biggest fraud over the last 100 years. And that's something that Bitcoiners we've been talking about for a long time. This printing of money it's not going away. It's starting to accelerate. It's causing the division between the really wealthy people and people that can barely get by and pay their bills. So I just wanted to know if your listeners caught that, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about something else called the Cantillon effect. Are you familiar with the Cantillon effect?
I'm not, but hey, go ahead and fill me in. That's why you're on standby here.
Yeah, for sure. So it basically describes the uneven effect of inflation. So inflation is not, when the CPI or the Consumer Price Index comes out and people talk about, inflation's 2%, 3%, what the central bank is targeting. But really what inflation is really different for different goods and services, right? So we know that some things like steak and I think it was eggs for a while there and so on were going up at like 15, 20% annually. But other things are actually going down or they're deflating. So the average inflation is what we hear from the mainstream media. That's the figure that we get from the government. The targets, but really inflation really affects people in different ways. Specifically, Cantillon effect, it really affects energy, and we're seeing that right now with the Middle East, of course, rent, housing, food. These things, I believe, are going up much faster than the 3% we're told.
I guess we only have StatsCan to go by. I mean, we just kind of have to trust when they say inflation is, say, 2%. We have to take their word for it. But I'm sure that there's a lot of people listening right now who would agree with the fact that inflation is hitting different people harder. And particularly when it comes to the different sectors, sometimes it's a much bigger impact than they're telling us.
Absolutely. And also, when you think about it, if the stock market's going up at 7 or 10%, or rent's going up at 7 or 10%, or the cost of fuel, which might even be more than that, it's really the difference between the price of goods and services going up and then the percent of increase in our income. And I don't think many people are getting pay increases these days. I know I'm not. So So if you're getting 2% pay increase to match what they say is inflation, but we really see a 10% increase in, say, food, we're down 8%, right? So it's really the difference between those two figures.
I am amazed that you track this stuff. Thank you very much for putting it like that.
Yeah, no worries. Scott, I love your podcast. You're doing a great job. Continue the good fight, my friends. And, I'd love to talk another time.
Yeah,
great job.
I'll definitely get you back in. We'll talk more about Bitcoin on another episode or more about the economy in general. What is your just overall assessment right now? It feels like a lot of people are broke and miserable. I
think that's exactly it. I think, who knows? Nobody can predict the future. I think we're going to go through some really hard times, especially with this energy crisis in the Middle East. It just means something called stagflation.
That's what I was going to ask you. Is this stagflation? Are we in it and they're not acknowledging it, or are we close to going into it?
Oh, I think we're definitely in it, and I think it's going to get worse, unfortunately. But I hope I'm wrong. Means basically more inflation, so the cost of goods and services are going to go up, but wages are going to stay flat or even decline because of all the job losses.
And
I really hope I'm wrong.
Do you think the Bank of Canada is going to raise interest rates?
Well, it's going to be interesting to see what they do, because if we have that much inflation from this energy crisis, they're going to really be in a bind. They're really in a corner now. In that if they increase interest rates, that's going to be really hard on the housing market.
Yes, it will.
We're gonna even go down lower. We could see another 15-20% drop potentially. But if they keep the rates where they're at and we have that inflation, it's also going to be a problem. So,
well, you know what, though? They know where the inflation's coming from. And in all likelihood, the inflation that is coming from energy is probably temporary. As soon as the war ends, there's a lot of reason to think gas prices should go at least close to back to where they were. Then that inflation could end as quickly as it began. I think raising interest rates based on that, especially when it's something that's completely out of people's control, taking money out of people's pockets so that they can't afford to buy gas, just seems very counterintuitive when we're trying to kickstart an economy. You know what I mean?
Exactly. The only thing I maybe disagree with is that I don't know if it's going to go right back to normal right away, because so much of the energy infrastructure has been destroyed or damaged. So a lot of that can take many years to come back online.
That's a good point. Well, you know what, though? We've got to build up our own, right? We've got to get more Canadian oil out to market, and that could help stabilize things very quickly if we can figure out a way to get it out there.
Absolutely. More pipelines, more LNG, and let's make friends with our neighbors again. That's probably priority number one.
Well said. All right, my friend, I know you've got a meeting coming up. Thanks for the chat. I will have you on for another episode again soon, okay?
Thanks, Scott. Appreciate you.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate you. Friends, to wrap it up, last night, and you're probably wondering, what the hell? I was watching the Hannah Montana 20th anniversary special. And you might be wondering, why the hell were you watching the Hannah Montana 20th anniversary special? Just a quick backstory. When Hannah Montana launched in 2006, my daughter was what would be tween age, and she was obsessed with Hannah Montana. And every parent probably knows that what your kids are into, you're going to get into. And because she was such a huge fan of Hannah Montana, I used to sit and watch this show with her. And when they announced they were doing a 20th anniversary special, I thought, this is great. My daughter's in her 20s now. She's an adult, but this would still be a fun thing to do if she came over to my place and we sat and watched the Hannah Montana special. So that was a real nice moment for my girl and I. I love that I mean, she's an adult and independent, and I'm so over the moon proud of her, but it's still nice when I can do a dad-daughter thing with her. One of the things I want to play for you, because I think that this is a really interesting insight and a good way to end off the pod. An interview with Miley Cyrus. For those who don't know, Miley Cyrus is Hannah Montana. Kind of crazy that kids didn't figure it out 20 years ago, but she puts on the blonde wig and she's Hannah Montana. She takes off the wig and she's Miley Cyrus. Incredible that kids didn't figure that out back in the day, but here we are. In any case, Miley Cyrus, leading up to the 20th anniversary special, said something really interesting that I think is worth you hearing. Listen to this.
You know, I'm so in love with the way my life has landed that I wouldn't want to give her any advice that would change the outcome, because I'm so at peace with where my life is at. I think the one thing that I would just remind myself is having fun.
Isn't that profound? How many people have had that thought in their head? If I could go back and give my younger self some advice, what advice would I give? And I hear this from time to time. It's things like buy stock in Apple and buy a house and get a university education. All these things. I hear that regularly. But how often do you hear somebody say, I like the way my life turned out and I'm happy and at peace where I am? The only advice I would give is try to have fun. Listen to that one more time.
You know, I'm so in love with the way my life has landed that I wouldn't want to give her any advice that would change the outcome because I'm so at peace with where my life is at. I think the one thing that I would just remind myself is having fun.
Have fun. Don't change the outcome. Friends, I love you for listening to this episode all the way through. Thank you to Ian for coming on, and I will have another brand new episode for you tomorrow. Tomorrow is budget day in Ontario. I covered the Manitoba budget today. I think I'll do Ontario tomorrow, and whatever else comes up in the next 24 hours. Have yourselves a great one, and I'll leave you, as always, with Pat James and The Whole Truth. Hey now.